Let us get started. This is going to be the how to make a component video. So we're just going to be going through the whole process, finding the component in Figma, understanding it, coming up with the logic, and then implementing it in code. I'm going to be trying my best to just put all of this in one video. So I'll pause and stop in some parts, so you guys don't have to keep waiting so that the video is a little bit shorter. But yeah, we're going to just make it from start to finish. Keep in mind, not all components are going to be made this way. So you just kind of have to look at, the tips and tricks that I'm giving you guys to make components and how to think about it. And rather just take the approach from me, but rather than this is the only way to make a component. I did make the component prior. So I'm just going to be referencing some of that code as well as I code. I'm not going to be, really like coming up with the code from scratch. I made it beforehand. And then also I did use AI to help me debug some stuff beforehand when I was making the component. So that's a very big part of helping me make components, using the MCP, using AI to help you look at what the Figma component looks like, use the MCP, use cursor. It's going to make it so much easier to figure out the little nuances that you might not be able to. But without further ado, we will start on the Figma page. We'll be making the toast component. And first thing I like to do when I look at a component is just look at the behavior of the component so I can understand how to think about it in code. So if you click on the component and you go to explore behavior, we'll be able to see how this component is supposed to work. So this component has a property, a title, and a description. So three things. When you see a component like this, think about this as your constructor, right? Your constructor is all the properties that the component can take, and then, you can set certain parameters to return a certain outcome. So think about these as parameters for a constructor. For example, the first parameter here is the status or the variant, basically saying that this component can be in an error state, a success state, a warning state, a info state. So there's, different types of states that it can be in. When I see this, I'm thinking of maybe creating an enum class, with just specific enums: error, success, warning, info, link, and note, right? So create an enum class, and these are the enums I have. And then over here, my first property would be the status, right? So I'll choose a status from that enum class. So, the first parameter for our constructor for this component would be the status. So maybe the status here would be success. Okay. Then that's something the user would say, okay, I want a success. Then the second parameter is the title, where they can type in a title. And as you can see, the title is a little bit different. Then also we have the description, where they can type in a description. So three parameters. Don't forget the icon as well. There's an icon there that I did not see, an icon as well. So, about four parameters. And then, yeah, that's kind of how I'm thinking about it. I also love to come to this side as well to kind of see how the component is made. Like I said, when I was making it, what I would do is just press Command L for Mac users, right? And when you press Command L, it copies this, and then it uses the MCP to be able to read everything that's on here. So if you don't know how to translate this into code, you just drag it into cursor, and then you just ask it to go ahead and use the MCP to look at this component, and then it will be able to go ahead and see exactly what's going on in your Figma, right? You can see the width, the radius, all the stuff that is needed, right? It can see all of that for you to help you make this exactly as it should look. Then you try to figure it all out by yourself. So that's just the tip for you there. As you can see, the MCP is looking at it. It can see it's taking screenshots of your Figma, and it's like trying to understand how to make that component. I would suggest that you still try to make the component with it, so you kind of have the final say of what it makes. Don't just let it make everything for you, because you kind of want to know how your component works. So figure out the logic first, right? The constructor, look at the component behavior and see, okay, I can have a constructor, I can have an enum class with these different states that this first property, which we're going to call the status, can be in. We'll have a title, and then we'll also have a description. Okay. And as you can see here too, the MCP does a good job. What is it? It talks about what the design is, property, title, the different variants. Variant is a good word to name it as well. It talks about the layout, top row, description, token. So it's really helpful. As you make it, you just type in and say what you need, and it can help you make it. So to make this component, we start off by freshly going to our design system. As you can see, we go to the design system, then we go to components. As you can see, we do not have a toast component, so we'll just go in the components folder and create a new folder. We'll just call it the toast component. We'll create that folder, and the first file we want to make is our enums file, like we discussed, right? So we will just call this let's just call it toast underscore enums. And then this is going to be a dart file, right? So we want to get all those different states that the component could be in, right? So for example, you would just say enum toast type, and then let me zoom that in a little bit more so you guys can see toast type. And then here you can just type in the different ones, right? I think we saw error, success, warning, info, note. So that's what we saw here, right? So we said we're going to turn these into enums, and then these are going to be called our SDEC toast status. Let's call them status. You can do variant, you can do status. I think status makes the most sense to me. Even state as well, but I'm gonna go with status. So note status, link status, info, warning, success, and error. Okay, so I'm actually not gonna call it type. When you're making stuff in the design system, always use the prefix SDEC and then whatever you wanna name it to. I'm going for toast status. Okay, and we're gonna use this when we go ahead and call it in the constructor. So we got error, success, warning, info, and then we have link, which is the purple one. And then yeah, that is pretty much like we can add that too. Just some documentation as well. Shed enums for toast components in the social deck design system. These define the toast types and their visual configurations. Pretty much, right? Toast types, yeah. The different shades of it, different colors. So now that we're done making that, we're gonna go ahead and make our actual file where we're gonna, write the code for the component. So we'll just, create a new file, and we'll call this file, we're gonna call this file let's try use the SDEC prefix. So SDEC underscore, this is going to be the toast dart, right? A new dart file, and this is where we're going to write the code, like, for buttons, like how we do it for the different ones, right? We have enums, and then we have the actual one, SDEC outline button, SDEC solid button. So same thing here, we just copy the same architecture. Now we got SDEC toast. Right, so we're gonna build it from scratch. First thing we want to do, always try to make your components stateless, but sometimes they might need a state. But for this one, it's pretty much stateless. We don't have to have any state going on too much, so we'll make this a stateless component. And the reason you can know if it's stateless or stateful, it's just by doing some research, maybe talking to Ethan, seeing how the component should behave, doing some research as well, what would be the best way to make it stateless or stateful. You can even ask your MCP. You can just ask it here. Should this be stateful or stateless? Just ask it. No, and then why? Just to make sure that you know as well. But in the meantime, I'll let that go over there. So we will start off by making it stateless. So we'll call it we'll start by creating a class. And this class will be the SDEC, right? Always want to use that prefix when you're making components inside the design system. Okay. This makes it easier for us to call. So SDEC extends stateless, and then we'll close that. Zoom out a little bit. So we just created our class. Cool. And then let's see what this. Oh, yeah, we can add that too, actually. Just some documentation. Properties. I'll wait. So let's see what it had said here. For the toast itself, okay, it's pure UI, right? Summary: implement SDEC toast as stateless. If you need timers or animation, then you can change it to stateful. But so it kind of explains why you should make it stateless as well. So just a resource there to help you guys if you're working on stuff. Okay, let's continue. So we created our SDEC toast, which is a stateless widget, right? That's the first thing we want to do. We'll do some imports. This is a very important import for everything you do. Just the package Flutter material dot. That's what gives you access to the widget. And then what we'll do is we'll also import our enum class, which we'll be using soon. So just make sure we import that. And then some documentation, toast component for SDEC design system. Okay. Right. So first thing we want to add is some of the properties that we had discussed. The properties being the properties that are what our parameters are going to be. So we said this is going to be the enums. So these would not be the properties, but the properties would be like the parameters for the constructor, right? Very important. So property 1, we said we're going to make it like the SDEC toast status, right? The state that it's in. So we need to know what state is this property in, so that when someone in the code calls the component, they can choose a state. They can choose a state where it's purple. They can choose a state where it's blue, a state where it's warning. So they just worry about adding the correct parameters to make the component shift, and shape shift to what we want it to look like. Especially for the backend people, we just want to call the component and then say we want this component in a success state, and then we'll just go ahead and we want the option to add like a title and a description, right? So when we get the component, it should be ready. The colors should be good. It should behave like this already, and then we'll go ahead and wire the actual state behind it. But we should have access to everything here. So all these and the colors and everything, the front end should be responsible for delivering it to the back end this way. So that's what we're kind of thinking of, right? When we're making components, how do we hand them off to the back end? So if we go back, we have made our enums class, right? Which will have all the different states or status that we can access. And then now here we're adding the properties. The properties are pretty much the parameters for the constructor, right? So we'll have like final SDEC toast status, right? We'll also have final string because we're going to do a title. So do title. And then we'll have another one, which was the description, I believe. Yeah, we had the description as well. So we had status, title, description. Perfect. And then we'll also have another one for a final void callback on dismiss. And this is for the icon, right? So that when you go ahead and hit that icon, it will go away, right? Because as you can see, this component does have an icon right there. I'll make it clear. So right there, it has an icon so that when the person sees the notification, they can click on that X and it goes away, right? So that's what that one is for. And then now we'll go ahead and build our constructor, right? So we'll type in constructor. Perfect. So yeah, we got the const sdec toast, right? Super key for constructor. It initializes the status. The title is going to be a parameter, the description, and on dismiss, right? And pretty much what this means, pretty much for me as a backend developer, is that when I call this sdec toast component, I'll be able to say, when I call this component, I'll be able to declare the status I want, which would be one of these. And then I'll also be able to say the title. I'll be able to say the description, and then I'll also have access to on dismiss. Okay. I can see this video is at 16 minutes, so I think I'll go on for just 4 more minutes, and then I'll make a part two and finish everything in part two. The last thing we need to do for here is just add a build method. So we'll do a build method. Definitely use autocomplete, guys. Autocomplete is super good. And this build method is just going to return a container, but we're going to build all our code down in here. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and, just add our code down in here for the component we're going to build. The next thing I just wanted to do here quickly as well is because now that we're making a component, we need a way to like test it and see it as we build it. So this is where it's going to be important for us to create a test page, right? So I have this folder called test pages right here. And what you guys can do as well, you could just also use this folder to help you guys. And what you do is you just create a test page specifically for your component you're going to make. So you go to the test pages, you create a new file, and then you'll create a file that's just called toast underscore test underscore page, right? And then press Dart. Then once you're done creating your test page, this test page is just for you to be able to display your stuff, right? This test page is going to import the design system, because remember, we're making that component in the design system, right? So we need to import, of course, the materials. Oh, wait, look at this. I think it's already doing it pretty good. Class, stateless, super key. Yeah, this is actually pretty good. The reason it's red is because it hasn't imported it from the design system. So another one is import design system. So we've imported the design system now. Then we're creating a class called toast test page, which is also just stateless. And then we're creating a build method. We're going to return a scaffold. And then in that scaffold, we'll have a safe area, a column. Then in the center, we're going to call this component, our toast component, right? And then let me see. Oh, it's doing children. We're just going to call one of them. So let's close this. Okay. Then, sorry, as I was saying, this is just an example of how like we would call it, like a backend person or a front end person. They would call that component, and then you would have the status, which is the first parameter we have to populate. Then we would use the sdec toast status, right, which is the enum class right here. The sdec toast status would call one of these statuses, error, success. For example, this is just a test page, but in a normal page, you would call it like this, right? The title, error, because you're calling the error status. So the title will be error. Then you'd have the description as well, right? So pretty important. The last thing is we need to wire this, right? So we've created a test page called host test page. So let's run our app and then go to main. And in main, what we'll do is we'll go ahead and once we log in and we get to home, right, we'll have some buttons there and we'll deroute one of the buttons and then reroute it to our new page, if that makes sense. So like for example, if we go to home, which is in features, so we're leaving design system, we're going to features, we're going to home, going to the pages here. And for example, these buttons, right? So instead of having this invite friends, right? We'll just go ahead and delete that button and change it to toast, right? Test. So this is going to change that button in home to the toast test. And then we're going to change the route of it. So instead of having training, instead of pushing to the training invite friends, we're going to have to create a new route, which is going to be the toast test toast, right? Let's say that's going to be our route. But we do have to go add this route in our routes page, right? So I know you guys know how to route, but we'll go through it again as well on how to create a route. So we have it, in here. So we have the endpoint. We said we're going to call it test toast, right? So we'll go ahead and go to the, what do you call it? The config. In config, we're going to go to constants. We're going to go to route constants. And in route constants, you see, we have the test routes. We're just going to add our new one. We're going to add a new test route. We'll call it post test. And then at the bottom, we're just going to add that route that we discussed right here. I believe we called it the test toast. So just like our endpoint. So now we've added it into the constants. Now all we got to do is just go add it to the routes. So all the routes for the app live in here. So we'll go ahead and just, go ahead and add our route. We can just add it right here, right? And it's going to call the social deck test pages toast test page, right? This is the page that we want to route to. It's the new page we are making, right? This page right here. We want that when we press that button, it takes us to this new page that we can test on. So we'll go back to routes and continue adding that route. Once you're done adding that route at the top and importing the page, you just go to the bottom, look for test dev routes, and just go ahead and follow the same architecture. Go route path, app path is toast test is the name, and then this is the page, right? So look at this, toast test page is the name of the class, right? If we go to the toast test page, you'll see that the name of the class is the toast test page. I know this is a lot, but if you go to home, right, and you click on the toast test solid button, it's going to route you to the test toast endpoint. And what does that endpoint point to? If we look at our route constants, we can see that that endpoint points to the toast test, right? And that toast test is in routes, which we have over here, right? The toast test is here. It points to this class. So that's pretty much what we have tried to accomplish over there. And then we can just look at it on the emulator over here. So if we have a quick look at it now, as we can see, it changed from invite friends to the, that was toast. So if we go to home, right, it's supposed to be toast, the toast test. So pretty much just rerouted it so that when I click this button, it takes me to the new page where I'm going to be working on the component, right? So I'm just going to hot reload this. So now it's going to say toast test. We click on this and it just takes us to an empty page because as of right now, we're not returning anything. So once we start building this component, everything will start to show up on here. Because the reason it's empty is because the component right now, it just returns an empty container. So there's nothing to return or see. But we're going to build it in the design system and then, test, build, so you guys can watch the component come to life. So next video is going to be me just finishing up and building the component. And then, yeah, we should be good after that. So just please watch part 2.